Okay, let's get into it. West Virginia has officially handled the Bob Huggins situation tied to the Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame coach earlier this week using a homophobic slur twice live on radio. No termination. He will continue as coach of the Mountaineers. His punishment is a 3-game suspension, sensitivity training, and a $1 million reduction in salary, down from $4.2 million per year to $3.2 million per year. West Virginia also made it clear if he ever says anything like this again, he will be terminated immediately. Dead leg, does the punishment fit the crime?
It's pretty expansive. Now, it's light on game suspension, but on the whole, with everything that's been taken into account here, one, I'm not surprised he wasn't fired. I did not anticipate he would be fired. Just in tracking the story on Monday, then into Tuesday, and then here into Wednesday, there's a lot. It's quite clear, judging by the release that West Virginia put out from its president, Gordon Gee, and then the AD, Ren Baker, that a lot of consideration went into everything with this. And I'm happy to see at least that this does not appear to be shallow words in damage control. This doesn't appear to be, let's spin it as best we can. I'm going to read directly from the statement real quick. GP just said some of the stuff off the top, but I think some of this stuff here is among the most important. Then we'll get into Huggins and how we even found ourselves in this situation. From the statement from West Virginia, and this is from the president, Gordon Gee. It is also a moment that provides the opportunity for learning, a moment that can shine a light on the injustice and hate that often befall the members of our marginalized communities. While the university has never and will never condone the language used on Monday, we will use this moment to educate how the casual use of inflammatory language and implicit bias affect our culture, our community, our health, and well-being. To begin, the athletics department will partner with WVU's LGBTQ+ Center to develop annual training sessions that will address all aspects of inequality, including homophobia, transphobia, sexism, ableism, and more. This training and programming will be required of Coach Huggins and all current and future athletics coaching staff. Next, according to the Williams Institute, West Virginia has the highest percentage of transgender youth in the nation. To address our concerns of our West Virginia youth, Coach Huggins will be required to meet with LGBTQ+ leaders from across West Virginia with guidance from the leadership of WVU's LGBTQ+ Center. We want to partner with ACLU West Virginia, Fairness West Virginia, Morgantown Pride, and other organizations to elevate the conversation regarding the issues that affect our state. Through those conversations, we expect Coach Huggins, in accordance with these partners, to engage in additional opportunities to show support for the LGBTQ+ community. There's more. I won't continue to read the entire statement. I thought this was extremely important. Huggins is also going to donate to Xavier, in addition to making anti-gay, homophobic comments. He did also make, comments, against Catholicism and Catholics there, and the backdrop of him having coached at Cincinnati, and just I still can't believe we're in this situation in 2023 talking about a situation like this, but yet here we are. Huggins is now going to go from a multi-year contract down to a year by year, and he is getting $1 million chopped off his salary. This was a no-brainer. I said it on HQ earlier in the day before it was official. I'm glad to see it. That money is going to be used directly to uplift and benefit these organizations that is specifically in the LGBTQ plus community, which is very nice to see. Huggins had a long statement, says, "I have no excuse for the language I used, and I take full responsibility." There were cries for him to be fired. There were cries for him to resign. I don't necessarily disagree with those on face value, but I do think what we have here is it's a genuinely great opportunity to take a horrible situation and actually provide tangible learning steps moving forward, and not have this just be, man, Huggins said that one awful thing. Remember when Huggins said that thing, and then a week goes by, months go by, and everyone's just kind of forgotten about it and whatever. No, this can actually be something that can be used to positively impact members of a marginalized community at a time when obviously, very inflammatory speech and hate crimes and hate speech. Anyone listening to this podcast, it has to be all too aware of just how the temperature in the proverbial room has increased and not in the right way, particularly in the past few years. So I think that West Virginia, on the whole, handled this about as well as it could have, shy of actually severing from its alum Hall of Fame coach, who is quite obviously in the winter of his career. What are your thoughts on what West Virginia put out here on Wednesday, GP?
Okay, as you're talking, a few things occur to me. One, you called me Gary. I don't think I've ever heard you call me Gary.
That's incorrect. I've clearly called you Gary before. That's your name. But normally
it was
call you Parrish. Yes.
It was startling to me. I don't remember. I'm usually GP or Parrish to you.
That's true. And you rarely call me Matt, but yes. But you know what?
Yeah,
maybe I did on some level, because this is a very serious topic, and so I went first name for the.
I understand. Okay, that makes sense.
That might have been
yes. Yeah, like as I was making notes, because we will talk about some other serious things later. I actually put a note in my file. Don't call him dead leg. That might seem inappropriate in this moment. So, or inappropriate
at the top of the show. So yeah, here we go.
Yeah, no, I meant as I'm getting into the Denny Crum part. Don't say, "Hey, dead leg, what do you think about Denny Crum?" Just like keep it.
The man is actually passed. Yes, that is a good idea.
You'll be Norlander when we get to that part. Couple of things occurred to me. I don't. You don't normally call me Gary. That stood out. The other thing is that I just realized you and I have not talked about this yet at all. Okay, so I want to take this in chronological order, like in the ways that it happened, because this all happens a couple days ago, and it's like, what? Because I had some people, like the audio starts circulating on Twitter, and I ain't saying nothing about it. And I don't think you said anything about it. And I don't think most people who cover our sport had said anything about it, tweeted anything about it. And I don't know what your mentions look like, but people started tweeting me like, so you're just going to ignore the Bob Huggins stuff? I'm not ignoring anything. Here's the truth. I don't know if that's real audio. Because what? Like, are we sure that's actually Bob Huggins? I mean, I know it sounded like it. Or is it somebody impersonating Bob Huggins, getting one over on some local radio guys in Cincinnati? That is a thing that happens sometimes. Somebody just randomly at the golf course the other day told me they heard that a fake Tucker Carlson called into Alex Jones and had Alex Jones tricked for like 12 minutes, thinking it was, I don't know. I don't live in that world, but like those things do happen. That's what. So first thing I wanted to know, is that really Bob Huggins? Then of course we get confirmation that it was. And I write the column that I write. We'll get to that in a minute. But when I tweet the column, I don't remember the exact wording, but it's something like Hall of Fame coach Bob Huggins went on live radio in Cincinnati and said a homophobic slur twice. Why? And then like, here's something, boom, 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 boom. And then my mention started getting people responding to that why in the most simplest, incorrect way. It was like, I know why, because he's a homophobe. That's not what I meant. For the sake of the conversation, let's just say that it seems obvious that Hugs does use that word in his day-to-day life, or that ain't the first time that word's ever come out of his mouth. I bet it's not the first time this year that word's ever come out of his mouth. He was clearly comfortable saying it. It was not a slip up. He said it intentionally. He used that word intentionally. What I meant when I asked why is like, what led to him saying those words? Not his core beliefs, but even somebody who is an actual homophobe knows that you can't go on live radio and say that word without consequence if you have something to lose. Like, I guarantee you Bob Huggins is not, if for the sake of the conversation, you want to label Bob Huggins a homophobe, fine. I bet you if he is one, if he is that, he's not the only famous person who is. Probably not the only famous basketball coach who is. I guarantee you there's a leader of a prominent American company right now who you could reasonably label as a homophobe. Here's my point. Even that person knows you cannot go on live radio and say that word or you will lose your job. So what I mean when I say what, why, how, I don't mean like this isn't Bob Huggins sitting in his garage talking to his buddies. He's on live radio. So what led to him being so comfortable to say this on live radio? And I still don't know that we have an answer to that. Do you have an explanation for that?
No, we don't have an answer or an explanation to that.
So let me say this. I think it's got to be one of two things.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is obvious. He had been drinking, and he was a little loose with his words, a little too comfortable. That is, as a drinker, I can tell you from experience, when you are drinking, you might take a conversation a place that otherwise might not go. You might take a situation to a place that otherwise might not go. Alcohol does a lot of things. I personally enjoy it, but have I ever said anything while drinking that I would not say if I were sober? Of course. And to be clear, I don't mean gay slurs or racial slurs or anything like that. I just mean like slightly inappropriate stuff about, like it just, or things that I wouldn't normally say to somebody, but I'm saying it to them now because I've been drinking. So the obvious explanation, or at least one on the list of things that could have led to this moment, is like he had been drinking. The other one is he didn't know he was on live radio. He simply was not aware. Either that they were putting him on live radio, or that he was on live radio in that moment. You go on radio shows all the time. I host one. I go on as guest. Sometimes a host will talk to you off the air. I don't do it because I don't like to do it. I don't want to talk to my guest until we're live on radio, if only because I don't really see any point in it. I don't need to. But other hosts do. Like I can tell you, a producer will call me. This is a very normal thing. Producer will call me and say, hey, is now still a good time for you to come on the show? Sure. Appreciate you having me. Okay. The host wants to yell at you real quick before we come back. Okay. Patch him in. GP, hey, so off the record, let me ask you about this before I get you on the air. Are you comfortable answering this question? Whatever. So these types of things happen. And then he goes like, all right, thanks. And then I can tell you there are certain times where then this host will ask another question, and it's like totally the type of question they might actually ask me on air. And I answer it. And in that moment, I'm like, are we on or not? Are we still off the air, or are we now on the air? I'm a little confused. That happens in radio. And so I wonder if that was a factor here. If he simply didn't know he was saying what he said on live radio as much as he thought he was saying what he said privately to two buddies. What do you make of that?
Both of those, either of those could be true. Both of them could be true at the same time. It could have been scenario
that's
one.
the other thing. They could both be true.
Correct. And having heard from people in the basketball community, that has been obviously an immediate topic of speculation, which also doesn't necessarily reflect well on Bob Huggins either, as an aside, oh, by the way. But the AD Ren Baker, there was some sort of golf event happening. He might have been on the course when all this happened, whatever. Obviously, the fact that he said it is atrocious, and the path that got him there, yes, there's a curiosity in terms of how that happened, but it doesn't matter. He said it was caught, and absolutely he's deserving what's coming his way. I will say, on this whole general topic that's happening, this feels like something out of like 2002. Like the fact that this happened and a coach said this over the air in 2023 is mind-blowing to me. Mind-blowing. Okay. Bob Huggins still has all of his faculties. All right. And go ahead.
Well, that's what I mean. So sometimes you can rule out things just because that's not what really happened. So I don't know what the actual explanation is, but Huggs has been speaking publicly for 4 decades. All right. He's never done anything like this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think the one thing you can rule out is that he knew he was on live radio and he was completely sober and he said what he said. There is no way that's the truth. No way that's the truth. It reminds me a little bit of what I used to say about Rick Pitino at Louisville. There is no way he knew those sex parties were going on in that dorm. Because if he did, at the very least, he'd say, get them off campus. There's cameras in there. You don't want dancers and hookers walking into dorms with cameras and all that stuff. So take them off campus. There's no way. I'm not saying Rick Pitino never knew anything about anything. I'm just saying there's no way he knew that was happening in that dorm named after his late brother-in-law, because he would have put a stop to that, or at the very least moved it. With this, there's just no way a sober Bob Huggins knows he's live on radio and he says what he said. That is not what happened here. So then you're just trying to figure out, well, what actually led to him saying that? And I don't know that it's clear, but the options I laid out are the only ones that make sense to me.
Yeah, and when he's doing this, I mean, Bob Huggins is also on the radio with, a longtime media member in that area that he has known for decades, and and one of his oldest assistants, I believe. And so the company that he is keeping in the course of this as well is also putting him in a position, whether he knows he's live on the radio or not, where he clearly feels extremely casual and comfortable to openly speak his mind. And in doing so, like the whole thing's frankly, it's obviously disgusting. The way the radio broadcast, the guys on the other end started laughing with all this.
Well, I can tell you, like,
go ahead.
in a similar deal,
Mhm.
like, I grew up in Mississippi. It might not surprise you to hear that I grew up around the N-word. It was everywhere. And every once in a while, I'll be with my old high school buddies, not often, like people I knew in high school, and I'll be around them and it'll be in their comfortable setting, and that word will still come up. And like, I couldn't imagine saying that. It's weird when you hear a white person say it, but because like it's just these old, they feel like, because I don't know what they feel like. I just let it go and I need to just keep it moving. But it feels like, 30 years ago in this same circle, that word might get tossed around by me. So I can still say it in 2023, at least around these people I've known forever. That felt like maybe what Bob was doing there, that he fell into a place of comfort with people he's known for a long time. And I take it a step further. I bet you that's not the first time he's ever used that word with those people.
Not exactly the largest leap of logic there on that, obviously. And the fact that that is the case is why people were calling for Huggins to be fired to begin with, because if he's really believing this and saying these things, is that someone that you want as, your most prominent public employee in that state, leading, your basketball program and everything that comes with all of that. And the leaders at West Virginia decided we aren't going to fire him. I mean, I was told on Tuesday that was a highly unlikely outcome because a lot of the people in power there did not seek to have that be the ending here, and they wanted to work their way around something different. And they came to that. I mean, 3 games is really light to me. Strangely enough, West Virginia, I believe, was the first power conference team to release its schedule this offseason. So we already, there's many schools, almost every school at this point has not released its non-conference schedule. West Virginia actually already has. So we already know the games he's going to miss. And wouldn't you be shocked to learn these aren't exactly the most high consequence games, and they're all at home. Missouri State, Monmouth, and Jacksonville State will not see Huggins on the sideline, but he'll be back in time, wouldn't you know it, for the Fort Myers tip-off, where West Virginia will either play Wisconsin or SMU in the first game, and then 2 days later down in sunny Fort Myers, Florida, will play the other team there before they get rolling with the rest of their schedule, including games against the likes of St. John's, the Backyard Brawl against Pitt. There's a high-profile game against UMass still in there, Ohio State as well. So 3 games does feel light. Everything else attached to the punishment I actually find to be the most important, and I think more than symbolic. We have a lot of tangible action here, and I do think that is important. Huggins, I'm not going to sit here and say that he wrote the statement. I would like to believe that part of him genuinely believes this, hopefully. I mean, hopefully so. Like, don't let this be an empty action. Don't let these be empty words. Like, actually try and have some sort of personal growth at this stage of your life and open your mind to this kind of stuff. Hopefully that does wind up happening, which circles me back to my question from you off the top. Mm-hmm. Are you satisfied with everything in totality of what West Virginia has done here and how it handled the situation?
Well, let me repackage that, because I don't know that I need to be satisfied. And more,
that's fair.
Honestly, I don't know what would satisfy me. I'm conflicted on this. It's interesting, by the way. I write this column the other day, and I tweet it. And I mean, you can go back through my mentions over the past 48 hours or whatever. Every once in a while, you'll get a response from somebody saying, "Oh, here we are, woke media trying to cancel a Hall of Fame coach because he said a bad word on radio. Oh, woke media. Hey, GP, you talk a lot publicly too. You want to go fire Bob Huggins, that's fine, but we'll be waiting for you to slip up next," right? A lot of that stuff. Here's the thing. Go read the column. Go listen to every word I've said about this over the past few days on radio or on my show. Go read any tweet. You know what you'll never find anywhere? Me writing or saying, I think West Virginia should fire Bob Huggins. I never wrote it. I never said it because I'm conflicted on this. You mentioned he works at West Virginia and he's a West Virginia icon. That's all true. I do think that plays a role in him not being fired where he works.
Mm-hmm.
If he was the UCLA coach, he would not survive this.
Nope. If he was he was a second-year coach at West Virginia, he wouldn't survive this. Yeah. No.
Right.
No.
So some of it is who he is, how much he means to that campus and state, and where he works. That goes without saying. But I will, if I'm being completely honest, I don't know. I'm stating up front, I don't know. I'd like to think I have answers for everything. On this one, I'm conflicted on it because Dan Wolken did write a column that said Bob Huggins should be fired. And he made some good points. One of the points Dan made was that, and he, of course, is a columnist at USA Today. He said, think about this in any other setting. You're the president of Disney, Apple, Coca-Cola, Nike, Chevrolet, doesn't matter. You go on radio, you say that word twice, you're done. First off, let me ask you, do you agree with the premise?
Not in every single scenario, but in many scenarios, yes, of course.
Okay. So Wolken's point is, so why is a basketball coach given more leeway? Like you're telling me the third in charge at Apple would be fired in 5 minutes if they went on live radio and said that word twice, but the West Virginia basketball coach can continue to do his job. Dan said that's crazy. And I get that. When you frame it strictly that way, it makes total sense to me. Here's the other side of it, though. Chris Beard is the head coach at the University of Mississippi less than a year after allegedly beating up a woman. That's the profession. Bob Huggins can't work in that profession?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't
think doesn't justify the other.
I agree, but I'm just telling you, like, how do you balance those things? Dave Chappelle in his most recent special had a bit on this about DaBaby. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Okay, he's a rapper and he's always up to something, DaBaby is. Anyway, the point Dave Chappelle made is that once upon a time in, I believe, North Carolina, DaBaby like actually shot a guy in Walmart, shot and killed him at inside of a Walmart. And as Chappelle jokes, and it did nothing to hurt his career. Not a thing. Didn't damage him in any way whatsoever. Then several years later, he went on stage at a festival, said a bunch of wild anti-gay stuff, and like he was out. Some people won't work with him anymore. He had to cancel shows, the whole thing. So the point Chappelle was making is like, are we really at a point where saying a word is worse than killing a person or allegedly beating up a person? And he just sort of leaves it there and lets everybody take it wherever they want to take it. But I do think it's a reasonable point to make. Let me be clear. If West Virginia would have fired Bob Huggins, I would not have been the guy writing the column saying, I can't believe they did this. How do you end a man's Hall of Fame career over two terrible words on radio on a random Monday in May? If West Virginia would have fired Bob Huggins, I would have said West Virginia fired Bob Huggins, and I understand why. But it's not clear to me that he had to be fired for this, if only because people who do different but also bad things, in this sport at least, sometimes either keep their jobs or even if they lose them, they get another one. I just don't know. I am uncomfortable trying to have super strong opinions about stuff like that because I don't even know how I feel about it.
Yeah, this is not an easy situation. And had he been fired, I think there would have been plenty of justification for it. You do have, what happens now is that you do have two extremely vocal dissenting opinions on this stuff before any verdict has been rendered. You know, you've got people on one side of it that are pre-outraged to a decision that hasn't even come. Like, people were reacting as though Bob Huggins had already been fired and want to go after I won't even use the trite, played out, completely lost all meaning. If you use, any of those phrases, just you're exposing yourself to be relatively shallow minded, frankly. And then on the other side of it, it's before we have any full review in, he's out right now, yesterday, immediately, let's go. West Virginia moved quickly, but did so thoroughly. And when we see the totality of this, to me, I think this falls short of the punishment that he should have been serving. I don't think a 3-game suspension really amounts to all that much. The stuff that is more important, I will repeat myself, everything else connected to this, I think, is the more important thing. And by the way, like, West Virginia and Huggins now have to, in making this decision, like, they also live with this throughout all of next season, which I do believe will be his last season. I think this is going to be his final season on the job at West Virginia. And every time he goes into certainly a hostile environment on the road in that conference, like, this is going to be part of it. And oh, by the way, that's not, I'm not saying that as like, oh, let's wait and watch. No, that actually, really sets it up for some more hideous stuff, frankly, that kind of poisons the environment, and can make West Virginia look bad even months after the fact with all of this stuff. So I look forward to seeing how Bob Huggins comes out and speaks on this topic multiple times, discloses, the sensitivity training he's gone through, and try and make this story as best as it possibly can be on the other side of it, because he really did expose a side of him that was appalling, and we should have there should be no tolerating any of this to any level. In not firing him or not having him resign, there is some level of toleration to that. But I do think that West Virginia did a lot here to try and advance the issue to make sure something like this doesn't happen again within its own university's borders, and certainly requiring every single person employed in the athletics department to undergo training moving forward, I think, is a very important next step.
Yeah, and it should be said, and I know people don't like this, but like, part of the punishment is that, in that apology that he released, he said, "I'm embarrassed." He said a lot of things, but among them, he said, "I'm embarrassed." The embarrassment is part of the punishment. Like, you have now painted yourself in a way that is obviously not good, and you got to walk around with that forever. There was a press conference with Dana White, after that video surfaced of him putting his hands on his wife, UFC president. And he made the point. He's like, part of my punishment is that this is now that's now how you see me. I don't want to be seen like that, but I understand that's the way you're going to see me now. And I got to walk around with that the rest of my life. And now Bob Huggins has to walk around with this the rest of his life. I'm not saying, and that's enough. It should be no more. I'm not here to debate what the punishment should have been, because, again, I'm unsure. I don't know. It's complicated. But whatever the actual punishment is, that is in addition to it. That's something else. Bob Huggins is like, we go on these podcasts, and Jeff Goodman, like, he always wants to ask you who you would like to have a beer with, right? And most people's answers, Goodman loves to ask you, what coach would you like to have a beer with?
I know.
And the answer is often Bob Huggins. I bet next time somebody asks that question, you'll hesitate before you say Bob Huggins, right? Not you.
Well, I've never answered Bob Huggins to that question. I'm also not a beer drinker.
I know,
but I hear what you're saying.
But you get the point. You get the point. Who would you like to have a drink with? Everybody's like, "Oh, Hugs is the best." People will be hesitant to say Hugs is the best. Oh, because of this. He's changed the way people look at him by using the language that he used. And in addition to the 3 games and the $1 million and the sensitivity training and all of that stuff, that is punishment as well. He's gonna have to live with this for the rest of his life.
He's not the only one, by the way. Greg McDermott at Creighton found himself mired in controversy for a different way, but certainly using the wrong terminology. He wound up keeping his job. There have been coaches across sports that have lost their jobs and coaches that haven't. So anyone that wants to paint this with a broad brush and saying that we live in cancel culture, well, that's not true, because we have plenty of examples where that hasn't been the case. don't know if you could hear that. Sorry, there was a car that just peeled out right outside my window there. I didn't know if the mic picked that up or not, but that was loud.
Oh, it definitely did.
Okay, there we go. And there have been cases where people have also been held accountable for their words and their actions there. So it's a case-by-case circumstance. And here, Huggins is going to hold on to his job for what I expect to be only one more season.